Hi guys, so this lesson is going to be on the second unit, political parties. Okay, so when it comes to political parties, the first thing you all should know that how to define a political party, which starts by generally defining what a political party is. It is a collection of individuals who are gathered together to pursue political power through democratic means. So, ideally speaking, a political party is a group. One person can't be a party; it has to be a group, and they are gathered together into a group with that common motive of pursuing political power. They can have like other motives as well, but like the main thing is they've got gathered together to pursue political power. That's the key. Okay, and of course you can add through democratic measures. There are political parties who would deviate from that democratic measures, but mostly through democratic measures, right? So if you go through the note, you can find a few more definitions given by different people. That it's okay to remember two or three of those and include them also in your answer. And following that, you need to know how to categorize political parties. Oh no, before that you need to know the main features of political parties. So first of all, political parties have the very first feature that they pursue political power. As you know, that's the whole point of forming a political party. That's the whole reason you form a political party, because you want to pursue political power. Then secondly, they mobilize public opinion. That means that the public opinion you see in the society is all over the place. Like what people think, the public opinion. The public opinion is very strong, but it's kind of like all over the place. It's not properly organized. So political parties have the duty of organizing that public opinion. Now, example, when the previous government, 2015 to 2019, when that government was in power, the public opinion sort of turned negative towards them because of certain weaknesses the government had. But just having a negative public opinion is not going to affect the government, right? So you need a political party to organize that public opinion and use it against the government, which is what the Rajapaksa's new political party did. They organized the negative public opinion against the existing government, and they used it against the government to topple that government. So mobilizing and organizing public opinion is one of the other features. Then of course they take members in membership, because more members you have, more successful your political party is, right? So more members the better, because then you have more people to carry out your tasks as a political party. So you take members in, you train members to be leaders of the party and all that. Also another feature is that they make policies. They have to listen to the public, what public want, and prepare policy papers. And an election is basically a process that we decide which policy we like the better. When we go and vote, we basically choose the best policy paper for the country. So if a political party wins an election, they have the responsibility of implementing the policies that they promised. So basically political parties create policies and they implement policies. That's also another feature. Also you can say that they train future leaders. They train leaders for the party as well as for for the party as well as for the country. Political parties train leaders for the country as well, the presidents, prime ministers and all that. Okay, so that also you can take as a main feature. And the other thing is, when it comes to the tasks of political parties and features of political parties, they kind of go parallel. They are very similar, like pursuing power, making policies, mobilizing public opinion, also are working as a source of informal political education, training future leaders, taking members in. Now these things are main features of political parties as well as main tasks of political parties, right? So whether you get the question for the exam as describe the main features of political parties or like describe the main tasks of political parties, the answer should be the same, right? Okay. And if we take a look at categorization of political parties. If you take a look at categorization of political parties, there are 4 categorizations you can do. There are plenty of categorizations, that ways of categorization that's available for you if you want to categorize political parties, but mainly in this syllabus we study about 4 of those. First of all, you can study with the political theory they are associated with, political economic theories they are associated with. That's why you have left-wing parties, right-wing parties, moderate parties. Now Sri Lanka is the best example. Sri Lanka has a right-wing party, which is UNP. That's a right-wing capitalistic party. Right? Then you have JVP, which is like a far left-wing party. And SLFP is known to be a moderate party, which is not extremely capitalistic nor extremely leftist. Okay. Or else you can categorize parties based on people's participation. There are cadre parties and mass parties. Mass parties are also known as non-cadre parties. So this word cadre confuses a lot of students. Ideally, cadre means that ran by the upper layer of the society. Now you guys know that there are certain political parties that are running on big money. They do campaigns using a lot of money. If you want to be a member of those parties, you need to be reasonably rich, right? And normally those parties are supported by rich people, aristocrats, basically ideally the upper layer of the society that you hardly meet members of those parties when you in your day-to-day life. You don't meet leaders of a cadre party at a food city or when you are taking a bus, right? So they don't have a day-to-day life. They are from the upper layer of the society. You hardly see them in real life. And these cadre parties are only active during election seasons, right? You guys saw these posters and these TV ads and all these things before the election, and now you hardly see any of these people except unless you watch news. That's because they are from cadre parties and they are only active during election seasons, right? Mass parties, however, are supported by ideally general public sort of people. Okay, mass parties are normally led by academics, intellectuals, labor union leaders, and that kind of people. So these parties do not function on high funds. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have funds coming in, and the party's membership is normally given to like middle class and lower class people. And it is most likely that you would meet members of these parties in your day-to-day life. And these parties are not only active during election seasons. You see these parties doing protests and pasting posters and being active even during non-election seasons. Now if you take the US, both parties are cadre parties. They have two-party system. Both parties are cadre parties. Republican, Democratic, both parties are cadre. You take Great Britain. In Great Britain, one of their main parties is cadre. Conservative party is cadre, and the other party is Labour Party is mass or non-cadre. In Sri Lanka, you can see the main two parties, UNP and SLFP, are cadre parties. whereas JVP and most of the socialist parties are mass parties, cadre parties, consisted of average people, not like very rich aristocratic tycoons. Okay, right. So in terms of how the political parties handle the public opinion, there are two types of parties. First, you have representative parties, then you have integrative parties, right? So the difference here is that when it comes to a representative political party, they just adapt into the public opinion. Whatever the people want, whatever the opinion people have, the party represents that without trying to change it. And integrative parties, they try to change what people think. Right? Now example, let's say if the public opinion is sort of racist, representative parties be like, okay, people are racist, so we also need to be racist if we want to win elections. Integrative parties will be like, no, people should not be racist, so they try to change the public opinion and turn people non-racist. Can happen the other way around also. Let's say if the public is non-racist, public is like very liberal and all, then the representative parties will be like, people are like, we're not very racist, so we should be non-racist as well because people are non-racist. But the integrative parties could be like, no, we need to turn people racist. Can be positive or negative. As far as the parties trying to fit into what people already think, they are a representative party. If they try to change what people think, that's an integrative party. Okay, right. Then you can categorize parties based on the approach they have to gain power. Now we saw when we defined political parties before, we added a certain point called democratic measures, pursuing political power through democratic measures. So if the party is going through democratic measures, they are known as a constitutional party, that they work according to the constitution. But sometimes if they go into like some non-democratic aggressive measures like going into a revolution or going for an insurrection or something like that, that is known as a revolutionary party. Right? So those are the categorizations. Now there are plenty of other ways you can categorize political parties, but these four are the important ones which are there in the syllabus. Right. Then that's pretty much about political parties. Now you have political party systems. Alright. So each country has a political party system. That is depending on how many political parties are in your country and how many of them are actually influential. Based on that, you check how many political parties are there in that country, and you check how many of them are actually influential. Based on that, you can categorize the political party system. So mainly there are three systems that you can see in the world. You have one party systems, two party systems, if not bi-party systems, then you have multi-party systems. One party system is very straightforward. There is only one political party in the system. Two party or bi-party means there are many political parties in the system, but only two of them are influential and dominant enough, whereas other parties are completely insignificant. That's a keyword. Completely insignificant. Other parties, right? Then you have multi-party system, which means you have more than two or more influential parties, which means there are more than two potential government makers. That's a multi-party system. There are subcategories also which we'll get into later. Okay, right. Now Basically, a one-party system means if you only have one political party in the system. So you can see one-party systems under three types of countries. First of all, if it's a fascist country, it is a one-party system. You guys know fascism basically creates a dictatorship. So in a dictatorship, of course, only the dictator's political party is the one that exists. In Germany, only Hitler's Nazi party existed. In Italy, Mussolini's fascist party existed, right? So if the country is fascist, it's a dictatorship, which means definitely it's going to be a one-party system. Forming another party means that you're going to get a bullet, right? They kill you. They basically kill you if you form another party in a fascist country. Then secondly, if the country is a socialist country, then also you have a one-party system, right? In a socialist system, it is not that strict like a fascist country. Like maybe you won't get killed, but they will imprison you. Forming a new party is still an offense in a socialist country, but the reasoning is somewhat justified, because what they say is like socialism means like discipline. You need a lot of discipline to run a socialist country. So if you form like other political parties, and if there's a government change, power transformation between two parties, that the socialist policy that you are applying is going to be interrupted. So they don't want that happening. They want socialism to be applied continuously. For that reason, they say there's only one party, the Socialist Party. So the government, basically the regime won't change. So the socialism will continuously be applied, right? So unlike fascism, that in a socialist country there are elections that people are allowed to get into politics, and you can contest elections and all that. Yes, but the thing is, you can contest from the Socialist Party only, the Communist Party only. Now in China, you have the Chinese Communist Party. In the Soviet Union, they had the Soviet Socialist Party. That's the only party in the country. And if you want to get into politics, you can contest and you can get into politics, but from that party. So elections happen between the members of the same party, right? So that's the second one. Then thirdly, in liberal democratic countries also, it's a very rare occurrence, but in liberal democratic countries also sometimes one-party systems can exist, right? But this is a very rare thing. This happens because now you guys know in liberal democracy, anyone is allowed to make a political party. You have the liberty and the freedom to do that. Okay, so you have the liberty to do that, but there can be instances no one is bothered to start a political party, or forming a political party like would makes you feel guilty, something like that. Now the example is in South Africa. When South Africa gained independence, the leader of their national fight, Nelson Mandela, started a political party, and basically forming another political party meant that you are contesting against Nelson Mandela, which something no one was willing to do, right? It's not that it's not illegal to form a political party, but no one had the audacity to form a political party to contest against Mandela, because he was a very beloved person. I mean, you feel guilty to do that, and you won't even get votes, because Nelson Mandela is a great leader and there's no reason to go against him. So although people have the freedom, no one is willing to form a political party. That's for not because of fear, because like maybe there's no necessity to form a political party, or maybe it's too controversial. Could be anything, but it's a liberal democratic system, but no one forms a political party, although they have the freedom to do so. So that can happen. So these are the one-party systems. So what are the advantages of one-party systems? Basically, its political conflicts are very limited. Of course, there are no political conflicts at all. You only have one party, right? That's there. And the governments get like, the government policies are uninterrupted because regimes don't change, right? That kind of things are there, that kind of advantages. Then disadvantages, yeah, it's not very democratic. People don't get to choose, right? Democracy is very limited under this. Alternative political opinions aren't given any space in the political system. So these kind of disadvantages are there. There are more advantages, disadvantages in the note that you all may go through, right? So let's keep that one party system aside and take two party systems and multi-party systems and compare the two. So basically in both these systems, multiple political parties exist. Okay, you don't have anywhere, any country in the world that they only have two political parties. That's practically not possible, no? Right? Unless it's a one-party system, or if you say that you all are allowed to make political parties, no one's going to stop by forming just another party. People will be forming more political parties. So it's either one or many, right? So if there are many political parties in your system, depending on how many parties are actually serious enough, influential enough, dominant enough, how significant, depending on that you categorize them as two-party and multi-party systems. So in a two-party system, many parties exist, but only two of them are influential and dominant enough, whereas the minor parties are insignificant. That's a keyword. Minor parties are insignificant. No one cares whether they exist or not, right? Now you can see in the US, Democratic Party and the Republican Party get more than 98% of the votes. There are plenty of other parties in the US. They have the Libertarian Party, American Communist Party, Green Party, right? So many parties like that, but all those small parties combined, they only get about less than 2% of the votes. So they are so insignificant. Whatever the votes they get don't matter to the main governments at all. The main parties to form governments. So they don't matter at all. So that's a two-party system. A multi-party system is a system that you have more than two influential parties. Mostly you see this in European countries. France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland. In these countries, they have about 4 or 5 big parties that are capable of forming a government, right? So you have more than two influential and dominant parties. That's a multi-party system, right? We'll get to the subcategories later, where Sri Lanka and India belong to. Okay. Then what are the advantages of a two-party system? First of all, governments are quite stable, because in a multi-party system the problem is, now that there are more than two potential winners, more than two potential government makers, more than two main parties, none of the parties manage to get a majority alone, right? Because when there are like 4 or 5 big parties, all of them end up getting like 20-30% of the votes. No one gets like 50% of the votes alone, right? So because of that, most of the times governments have to be coalitions, combinations of parties. And as you guys know, in common sense, coalition governments are not very stable, right? But when it comes to two-party system, it's always going to be a solitary party government, because there are only two parties now, right? Now that there are only two parties, one of the parties is going to be the government, other party is going to be the opposition. No coalition. So governments are stable under this. Governments are very stable under the two-party system, which is a disadvantage in the multi-party system, that coalition governments occur, which creates some political instability, right? And also in the two-party system, political conflicts are reasonably rare. That again because of there's no coalitions. In multi-party systems, there are so many internal conflicts because the governments are most of the times are consisted of more than one party, right? But on the other hand, when you take the multi-party system, that allows people more choices. Now you saw in the 2016 presidential election, USA has a two-party system. So Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, and most of the Americans didn't like either of them. But they had no choice because it's a two-party system. They had to choose one of them, right? But in a multi-party system, you have more than two choices. So the options, there are more options available for the voters. Okay. Also in a multi-party system, that is more suitable for democracy because every ethnicity is represented, different political opinions get representation and all that. But in a two-party system, basically there are only two parties. So different ethnicities, different political opinions and those things do not get the representation in the political system. Alright. Okay, so that's the two-party system and the multi-party system. Now there are two subcategories. There are two subcategories of these political party systems. One is multi-party system with two-party dominance. Other one is multi-party system with one-party dominance. So multi-party system with two-party dominance is a unique system to Sri Lanka. Now we are somewhere in between the two-party system and the multi-party system. That means Sri Lanka is a multi-party system. They have so many political parties, right? With like with like a lot of reasonably influential parties. Now it's not like the US that we have Democratic and Republican parties only and the other parties are completely insignificant, right? Because we have SLFP, UNP, and other than that we have reasonably influential parties like JVP, TNA, Muslim Congress. These parties are also reasonably influential. But it is not like France that all these parties are potential government makers. It's similar to a two-party system that only UNP and SLFP, or basically those two political camps, are the ones that are capable of forming a government. Which means we have many influential parties, but out of them, only two of them are dominant. So it's a multi-party system with several influential parties, only two of them are dominant enough. That means only SLFP and UNP are capable of forming governments. But in order to form governments, you need the support of those minor parties. It is necessary to have the support of the minor parties. They are not insignificant. In our system, the non-dominant parties are not insignificant. They are just non-dominant. That's all. They are influential, not dominant. Okay. And the multi-party system with one-party dominance is a unique system to India. Because in India, what happens is India is a huge country. So having a political party that expands throughout India is nearly an impossible task. The country is huge, right? So even the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi, even his party is expanded throughout only a few states, right? Having a party throughout India is not possible. So therefore there's only one political party who is capable of being influential throughout the country, and that is the Congress Party of India. This Congress Party has this influence all over India. That's because it was started by the freedom fighters, the Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. Basically they had an organization in order to win independence to their country, and that organization turned into a political party under the name Congress Party. So because of that, that organization had expansion throughout India, and they had that advantage when they turned into a political party. Since then, since 1947, so many political parties have been formed in India, but none of them are capable of going throughout India. So because of that, when it comes to national elections of India, the central government parliament elections in India, the Congress Party gets an overwhelming number of seats because they are expanded throughout the country. Now they get about 300 odd seats, and the second place gets about 80, 90, something like that, which is like a huge gap between the first and the second. And there are so many political parties like the one that came second, who are getting seats from a certain area of India. So you have Congress Party, which is the dominant party in India, that gets about 300 odd seats alone, and then you have the second place Bharatiya Janata Party getting like 90 seats, then Aam Aadmi Party getting like 70 seats, then the Communist Party getting about 40 seats. There are so many small parties like that, minor parties. So what happens is, these minor parties get together and form a coalition to challenge the solitary power of the Congress Party. That's what happens. That's why you say it's a multi-party system with multi-party system with one party dominance. This is one dominating party, and the minor parties, all the minor parties get together to challenge the authority of the solitary Congress Party, and that's how Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister. Narendra Modi's alliance, that coalition, has about 16 parties in it. So when you put all those 16 parties together and start a coalition, that can outnumber the number of seats the Congress Party has. So that's a multi-party system with one party dominance. So that's about it for the lesson of political parties. I'll do another video for pressure groups.